The diamond crown shimmered like a palace that evening, its towering crystal chandeliers scattering 1,000 shards of light across marble floors. Polished to perfection, waiters in crisp white jackets floated between tables like dancers, balancing trays of champagne flutes that sparkled as if filled with liquid gold. The air pulsed with laughter, sharp, self-satisfied laughter that echoed too loudly. A sound meant to remind anyone listening of wealth and power. It was Boston's most exclusive restaurant, a temple for the city's elite. And tonight it thrummed with the anticipation of celebration. At the far end of the room, a champagne fountain gurgled as if it were the restaurant's heartbeat. Guests gathered around it, draped in gowns stitched with sequins and tailored tuxedos that gleamed under the light. The scent of truffle butter and seared filet mingled with the faint tang of expensive cigars. Every detail screamed of luxury, but behind the perfection there was a restless current. A sense that the evening was more than just dinner. It was the prelude to something monumental. In the corner, at a table reserved without ceremony or fanfare, sat a little girl in a wheelchair. She looked small against the grandeur of her surroundings. Her honey brown curls haloed in the glow of a candle, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Lily Morgan did not belong to the noise and spectacle of the night, yet she did not shrink from it either. Beside her sat Martha, her caretaker, a woman whose kind eyes softened each sharp edge of the evening. She leaned close when she spoke, her voice low and steady, as though she were a wall shielding the child from the storm of indulgence that swirled around them. But Lily's ears caught everything. At 7 years old, she already understood more than most of the room's adults. She had lived through loss, tragedy, and whispers she was never meant to hear. Her father had once died here, his laughter rolling warmly through these very halls, and though he was gone, Lily could feel his presence in the gleam of the silverware, and the loyalty in the staff's stolen glances. This place was his creation, and though her legs could no longer carry her across the marble, her resolve kept her firmly seated across the room. The Richardsons held court at the central table as though they owned it already. Maxwell Richardson leaned back in his chair, one arm sprawled carelessly over the backrest, his diamond-encrusted watch catching every flicker of light. His smile was wide, but never warm. It was the practiced smile of a man used to being obeyed. Beside him, Diane Richardson sparkled in emerald silk, her posture flawless, her eyes sharp. Every tilt of her glass, every whispered word, was calculated to remind others of her place above them. Around the couple clustered their entourage, men and women eager to laugh at every remark, eager to be seen at the table of Boston's most ruthless dynasty by next week. Diane murmured loudly enough for half the room to hear, "This quaint little place will finally belong to us. Imagine what it could be once it's stripped of all this nostalgia." She waved a manicured hand at the gilded walls as though they were covered in dust instead of gold leaf. Maxwell chuckled, raising his glass. "To progress, to power, and to our newest jewel in the crown." A ripple moved through the restaurant then, carried not by the music, but by whispers. $1 billion acquisition. The Richardsons had nearly completed their purchase of the Diamond Crown, and, with it, another chunk of Boston's history. Servers exchanged uneasy glances, loyal to the memory of the man who had built this place with his hands and his dreams. Guests leaned closer to one another, speculating about what changes would come. At her corner table, Lily sat very still, listening. The words brushed against her like cold wind. She knew the voices, recognized them from magazines left on her father's desk. She knew the names Richardson meant power, money, and hunger. She also knew that they were speaking of her father's life's work, as if it were nothing more than a plaything to be gutted and replaced. Martha shifted uneasily, her eyes flicking to the central table. "Do you want to leave, sweetheart?" she whispered. Lily shook her head slowly, her curls bouncing. Her gaze remained fixed on the glittering family across the room, her small face set with a determination far older than her years. "No," she said softly. "Daddy loved this place. I want to stay." And in the hush of that corner, with the echoes of cruel laughter bouncing through the marble hall, the first sparks of something greater began to burn behind Lily's steady eyes. Asterisk, the laughter grew sharper, slicing through the velvet air like glass breaking in slow motion. At the Richardsons' table, the wine kept flowing, and so did the cruelty. Maxwell leaned forward, his broad shoulders blocking the candlelight as he smirked toward his companions. "Did you see her trying to reach for the menu?" His voice carried, meant to be overheard. He lifted one arm in a grotesque mimicry of a broken bird, his diamond cufflinks flashing as he flapped a limb uselessly. The table erupted in laughter. a hollow chorus of indulgence that rang across the restaurant's marble floor. Lily felt her cheeks flush, though she kept her face still. Her small hands tightened on her lap, fingers pressing against the fabric of her dress. Martha reached over instinctively, squeezing her shoulder, her thumb brushing comfort into her skin. "Don't listen to them, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice a balm against the sting. "Some people have money, but no class." But Lily heard every word, every mocking note. She couldn't ignore it, and deep down, she didn't want to. 3 tables away, Diane Richardson leaned closer to her husband, her lips painted the color of dark cherries. Honestly, she whispered with a faint sigh that carried far too easily. "What kind of establishment allows that?" Her chin tilted slightly in Lily's direction. "It lowers the whole atmosphere. People like that should eat at home." Another ripple of laughter. Softer this time, but more dangerous. The kind of laughter that slithered instead of struck. That hummed through the air like poison carried on the wind. Thomas, the Mactor D, approached the Richardsons' table with practiced restraint. His back stiff, his voice polite. "Mr. Richardson, the kitchen has prepared your special requests." He bowed slightly, a gesture that cost him dearly. Thomas had worked for William Morgan for 15 years. He had seen the man pour his soul into these walls, and now he was serving wolves wearing silk. Finally, Maxwell said, glancing at his watch, "In our establishments, service will be considerably more efficient." His voice thundered with casual insult. Thomas bowed again, but his eyes flickered just once toward Lily. He saw her. He knew her. Everyone on staff did. But they had been instructed not to make a fuss, not to draw attention. Tonight, she was supposed to be just a little girl enjoying her father's restaurant. Except she wasn't. She was the quiet storm building in the corner. Lily's heart thumped against her ribs. Not with fear, but with something sharper. Something she had inherited from her father's blood. For 2 years, she had lived in the shadow of loss, hearing lawyers and board members speak of assets and sales, of her father's empire as though it were just a set of numbers in a ledger. But she remembered his voice, warm and steady. "We don't do business with bullies." Lily, never forget that. Martha noticed the change first, the way Lily's chin lifted, the way her brown eyes hardened into amber fire. "Lily?" she whispered carefully. The child turned to her caretaker, her voice steady in a way no 7-year-old should be. "May I have my phone, please?" Martha froze. "Your godmother said no business during dinner. Remember?" Her hand hovered over the bag resting at her side. "It's important." Lily's words cut clean, deliberate, as though she had rehearsed them in silence. Her small frame seemed to expand, filling the shadows of the corner with unexpected power. Reluctantly, Martha handed over the slim, specially designed phone. Lily's fingers moved across the screen with a confidence that startled her caretaker. Layers of security fell away under her touch. Passwords and barriers that even executives might have struggled with. The glow of the screen reflected in her determined eyes. She typed a single message. Just 7 words. "Cancel the Richardson deal immediately." For a moment, nothing happened. The restaurant hummed with clinking glasses and murmured conversations, as though the world hadn't just shifted beneath its foundation. Then, across the marble floor, Maxwell's phone chimed. His brow furrowed as he glanced at the screen. The smirk vanished. His face drained of color, twisting into something raw and ugly. "What the hell is this?" His voice boomed, startling half the room into silence. He shoved his chair back so violently it toppled to the ground with a crack. "The deal is off." "Who authorized this?" Diane snatched the phone from his hand, her manicured nails clicking against the glass. Her voice trembled as she read aloud. "It says the current owner has declined to proceed with the acquisition." The room hushed entirely now. Even the champagne fountain seemed to pause its gurgling flow. Guests turned in their seats, drawn to the storm erupting at the Richardsons' table. "They told us the owner was desperate to sell," Diane hissed, her voice fraying. "After that Morgan fool died, we were promised." And in the silence that followed, a small, steady voice rose from the corner. "Excuse me," every head turned. Martha wheeled Lily forward, each roll of the chair's wheels sounding like a drumbeat of defiance. The candlelight caught her curls, her small figure illuminated as though she were stepping into a spotlight she had been born for. "I believe you're talking about my daddy," Lily said, her voice carrying across the room with astonishing clarity. "William Morgan, and I'm not desperate to sell anything." The air cracked, heavy with the shock of a truth no one had expected to hear from a child. Maxwell's jaw clenched, his disbelief bordering on fury. But the girl in the wheelchair did not flinch. She looked at him the way her father once had looked at competitors, calm, unshaken, and utterly in control. And for the first time that night, the Richardsons had no laughter left. The restaurant was still. You could hear the faint clink of ice in a forgotten glass, the nervous shuffle of a waiter who didn't know whether to step forward or vanish. The Richardsons sat in disbelief, their empire of arrogance cracking at the edges. And at the center of it all was a little girl in a wheelchair, whose voice had just silenced Boston's wealthiest crowd. But Lily's mind wasn't in the Diamond Crown at that moment. It had already slipped back to the night 2 years ago when her world had been split in two. The smell of smoke, the sound of screeching tires, the crushing silence after the car flipped. She remembered the glow of headlights that seemed to stretch forever. Her parents' hands had been there 1 second and gone the next. That was the night she learned what loss tasted like. It wasn't just tears. It was metal and glass. It was the taste of blood when she bit her lip trying not to scream. The hospital rooms came next. White walls and machines that beeped too loudly. Voices that spoke in careful tones about mobility loss and rehabilitation. She remembered staring at her legs, willing them to move, feeling nothing but the hollow weight of absence. She had cried then, cried until her small chest hurt, until Martha had wrapped her in arms that felt like safety against a world suddenly too sharp. But even in the storm, her father's voice had lingered. He was gone, yet he lived in memory, in lessons spoken over dinners, in the warm cadence of his laugh when he bent to her level and said, "We don't do business with bullies, Lily, no matter how big they are." At 7, most children clung to stuffed animals. Lily clung to that sentence like a weapon dot in the months that followed. The world revealed itself in whispers she wasn't supposed to hear. She learned that her father's restaurant and his portfolio of businesses were now in the hands of trustees until she came of age. She learned that her godmother sat at board meetings where men in suits discussed numbers, as though they were carving up her father's bones. She learned that desperation was assumed, that her family's tragedy made them pray. And she learned how to listen. Lily's intelligence, always sharp, became something else, something calculating. She studied her father's old business magazines, tracing the bold headlines of names like Richardson, Kingsley, Harrington. She memorized them, understood them. She became quiet, but not small. Behind her eyes, plans formed. Now, back in the Diamond Crown, she faced the very people her father had once warned her about. Maxwell Richardson's face was blotched red, his jaw set hard, but his confidence was shaken. He had mocked her as if she were invisible, as if she were powerless. He had no idea the weight she carried. Thomas, standing stiffly near the table, watched her with eyes that glimmered with something unspoken, recognition, loyalty, hope. For years, he had served her father. Tonight, in the girl's steady voice, he heard William Morgan again. Martha leaned closer, her voice low so only Lily could hear. "You don't have to do this, darling. Not here. Not like this." Lily kept her gaze on Maxwell as she replied, calm and sharp. "Daddy built this place for people who respected it, not for people who laugh at little girls in wheelchairs." The words rippled outward. Guests shifted uncomfortably, their champagne no longer sweet, but bitter with shame. Some averted their eyes. Others watched with an awe they couldn't quite name. Maxwell slammed his palm on the table, rattling the glasses. "You think you can stop me?" His voice thundered, trying to regain ground, but it cracked at the edges. "You're a child. You don't know what you're playing with." This deal was as good as done. Lily tilted her head slightly, the flicker of a smile tugging at her lips. "Then maybe you should have thought twice before calling my daddy a fool." The silence that followed was heavier than any laugh they had thrown at her. Diane Richardson shifted in her chair, suddenly pale beneath her expensive makeup. The entourage of sycophants who had cackled minutes ago now sat frozen, unsure whether to meet Maxwell's eyes or distance themselves from the wreckage of his arrogance. The suspense hung thick in the air, a billion-dollar empire swaying in the hands of a girl who could barely reach the tablecloth. Yet her presence filled the Diamond Crown more completely than the chandeliers, the fountains, or the wealth around her, and deep inside, Lily knew this was only the beginning. Tonight she had spoken. Tonight she had made them pale. But there was more to reveal, more to claim, because she wasn't just William Morgan's daughter. She was his heir, and she was about to remind Boston's most ruthless family that empires don't always crumble when their kings fall. Sometimes they rise again in smaller, fiercer forms. Asterisk, the diamond crown breathed again, though unevenly, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Waiters hesitated mid-step, guests murmured in low tones, and Maxwell Richardson remained locked in a battle between rage and disbelief. But before he could unleash another thunderous insult, Diane rose gracefully from her chair, her emerald gown sweeping against the marble like a serpent gliding across stone. She lifted her glass of champagne, her fingers steady even as her jaw tightened. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice slicing through the silence like a jeweled dagger. "A toast." Conversations died at once. The clinking of cutlery stilled. All eyes turned toward the woman who carried herself with the elegance of royalty, though her eyes gleamed with something colder. To the future, Diane continued, her smile poised but brittle, to progress, and to what will soon become the crown jewel of our portfolio. By next week, this quaint little establishment will be reborn, modern, exclusive, worthy of the people it serves. She paused, letting her gaze drift deliberately toward Lily before returning to the crowd. A place for those who belong. It was subtle enough to be defended as harmless, but sharp enough to cut. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to raise their glasses or lower their eyes. Some drank out of habit, out of fear of being seen as disloyal to the Richardsons. Others hesitated, the words ringing too cruel, too calculated, even for Boston's elite. Asterisk, Martha's hand clenched around the armrest of Lily's wheelchair. "Don't listen," she whispered again, her voice tight, but her eyes betrayed a tremor of anger. Lily didn't move. She stared straight at Diane, her small face expressionless, though her heart beat faster. It was strange, she thought, how people like the Richardsons could drape themselves in silk and diamonds yet sound so hollow, so desperate to be admired. They thought cruelty was strength. They thought power came from mocking the weak, but Lily knew better. Across the room, Thomas, the Master D, approached with a silver tray, his step stiff with effort. He bowed slightly to the Richardsons as he set their next course before them. But his eyes betrayed his thoughts. He had been there when William Morgan first opened the Diamond Crown, had watched him shake hands with chefs, hug staff, and greet guests by name. To see the restaurant reduced to a trophy in the Richardsons' hands was an insult he carried in silence. Yet when his gaze flicked to Lily, he almost smiled. It was brief, a ghost of a smile, but it said everything. "We see you. We remember him. We're with you." Suspense coiled tight around the room. Diane took her seat, sipping her champagne with smug satisfaction. Maxwell leaned back once more, trying to reclaim his swagger, though the tremor of his earlier outburst hadn't fully faded. Their entourage chuckled obediently, but their laughter sounded forced now, thinner than before. Lily shifted slightly in her wheelchair. Her curls caught the candlelight, framing a face too young for the weight it carried. Her father's words rang again in her memory, "We don't do business with bullies." She had stayed silent long enough. Asterisk, Martha, Lily whispered. Her caretaker leaned closer, eyes anxious. "Yes, sweetheart, we'll meet closer," Lily said. Martha hesitated. "Lily, please." There was no pleading in the child's voice, only command. Martha's lips parted, then closed. She nodded once, her hands firm as she turned the chair. The wheels rolled forward, their sound amplified in the silence, as though each rotation was a drumbeat in a march toward. Heads turned. Conversations died completely now. The 7-year-old girl in the corner was moving, approaching the center of the room, approaching the Richardsons. Guests leaned forward in their chairs, breath caught in their throats. No one knew what to expect, but no one could look away. Asterisk, Maxwell's smirk faltered as the wheelchair stopped at his table. Diane's glass froze halfway to her lips. For the first time that night, the predators felt the unsettling sensation of being hunted. Lily's eyes lifted to meet theirs. Her voice, when it came, was calm but carried a weight that silenced even the clinking fountain at the far end of the room. "You're talking about my daddy, William Morgan," she said, her words clear and sharp as crystal. "And I'm not desperate to sell anything." It was more than defiance. It was declaration. The silence that followed was electric, charged with something larger than the moment. Every guest in the Diamond Crown understood instinctively that history was shifting in front of them. A billion-dollar empire was no longer in the grip of the Richardsons. It was in the hands of a little girl with fire in her eyes. And though Diane's lips tightened and Maxwell's fists curled, neither could speak. Not yet. Not with the room watching. Not with the ghost of William Morgan alive and burning through his daughter's voice. The Diamond Crown had never felt so alive. Asterisk. The stillness that followed Lily's words was the kind that did not last long. It was too sharp, too unnatural, and silence has a way of tearing at egos like Maxwell Richardson's. He leaned forward slowly, his diamond watch gleaming under the chandelier light. His face stretched into a smile that was less amusement and more snarl. "Listen here," he said, his voice low, measured, dangerous. "You think you can embarrass me in front of my people? In front of this city?" His hand slammed down on the table, rattling the crystal stemware. "You're a child, sitting in a chair you'll never stand up from, playing at being important. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I own?" Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Some guests averted their eyes, uncomfortable, while others leaned in, hooked by the growing tension. Diane's smile didn't falter, but her knuckles whitened against the stem of her glass. She knew her husband's temper, knew when it was on the edge of snapping. Lily did not flinch. Her hands remained folded neatly in her lap, her small frame unshaken. When she spoke, her voice was soft enough that the room had to lean in to catch it. "I know exactly who you are," she said, the faintest thread of steel beneath her childish pitch. "And that's why Daddy would never do business with you." The words landed like a strike. For a moment Maxwell seemed unable to move, unable to speak, his fury caught in his throat. Diane reached for his arm under the table, a warning touch. But Maxwell shook her off and barked a laugh that rang loud, to false. "Business?" He sneered. "What business? You don't own anything, little girl. You're nothing but a name attached to a fortune your family was too weak to hold onto. We're buying this place because no one left in your bloodline has the strength to keep it." Martha's hand twitched toward Lily's chair, ready to pull her back, to shield her, but Lily lifted one finger slightly, a silent request for stillness. Her eyes never left Maxwell's. "Strength," she repeated quietly, tasting the word as though it were a lie. Then, with the faintest motion, she extended her hand toward Martha. "Phone, please." Martha froze. Her pulse spiked, the weight of the entire room pressing down on her. She had seen this look before, not on Lily's face, but on William Morgan's. It was the expression he wore when he closed deals others thought impossible, when he fought for his people against corporations that treated them as pawns. "Lily," Martha whispered, her throat tight. "It's important," Lily said again. That same calmness as before, but this time wrapped in something even heavier, certainty. Reluctantly, Martha placed the slim phone in her hand. It seemed large against her small fingers, but Lily held it like a sword. She tapped the screen, bypassing encrypted barriers as if they were toys, and typed a short message. "Cancel the Richardson deal." Effective immediately, the silence stretched. It was as if the entire restaurant leaned over her shoulder, waiting to see what would happen. And then, across the table, Maxwell's phone buzzed. He snatched it up, his eyes skimming the screen. His expression morphed in seconds, from annoyance to confusion, to fury that stripped the polish from his face. He shot up from his chair, his voice booming. "No, no, no, no. This is impossible." His chair clattered backward, crashing against the floor. He jabbed a finger at the screen, as though his anger could bend it to his will. The deal was finalized, signed. Who the hell authorized this? Diane grabbed the phone from him, her hands trembling despite her composure. She read aloud, her voice cracking. "The current owner has declined to proceed with the acquisition." Gasps rippled through the diamond crown like a wave. Some guests whispered in disbelief. Others sat frozen, stunned by the audacity, by the reversal. The mighty Richardsons, undone by a message, Maxwell spun, searching the faces around him, his chest heaving. "This is a mistake," he bellowed. "A trick. Someone will pay for this." But before his rage could consume the room, Lily raised her voice once more. It was not loud, yet it cut sharper than Maxwell's roar. "It wasn't a mistake," she said. "It was me." The words silenced everything. The fountain's trickle, the murmurs of guests, even Maxwell's fury, all of it seemed to stop. Martha wheeled her closer to the table, her little figure illuminated by candlelight as though she stood in a spotlight. "I own this place," Lily said clearly, "and I own more than this. My father left it to me. You think I'm weak, but weakness isn't needing legs to stand. Weakness is hiding behind money because you don't have anything else." Her gaze swept across Maxwell, Diane, and their entourage, lingering long enough to burn. "You wanted to buy Daddy's dream. You wanted to gut it and laugh at it. But I won't let you, because he told me something I'll never forget." She paused, letting the weight of her father's voice echo in her memory, then deliver the words like a verdict. "We don't do business with bullies." The effect was seismic. Guests shifted in their seats, the staff lifted their chins with pride, and Thomas the MacD finally allowed the faintest, triumphant smile to bloom across his face. Maxwell's fury burned, but it had nowhere to go. His power, his wealth, his arrogance, none of it mattered in the face of a 7-year-old who had just undone a billion-dollar empire with a few words, and for the first time in years, the diamond crown belonged not to the rich who mocked it, but to the child who carried its legacy in her heart. Asterisk for a heartbeat. The diamond crown was frozen. Guests sat trapped between disbelief and awe, their gazes darting from Maxwell Richardson's blotched, furious face to the calm, steady composure of the girl in the wheelchair who had just pulled the ground out from under him. The silence broke with a single, nervous laugh, to thin, to brittle. Someone at the back raised a glass as if to lighten the moment, but no one followed. The room wasn't ready to laugh anymore. It was watching history fold itself into the shape of a little girl's voice. Maxwell shoved his phone back into his pocket, his hand trembling with rage. He leaned over Lily, his towering frame looming like a thundercloud, and hissed, "You've just made the biggest mistake of your short, pitiful life." His words were meant to terrify, but they cracked with desperation before Lily could answer. Diane shot to her feet, her emerald gown glittering under the chandeliers. Her mask of control finally slipped, revealing panic beneath the polish. "This is absurd," she snapped, scanning the room as if daring anyone to disagree. "She's a child, a crippled child. None of you honestly believe she has the power to cancel a billion-dollar deal." Her words ran to sharp, to cruel, and in that instant, the room shifted. Guests who had once whispered reverently about the Richardsons now stiffened, eyes narrowing. There are lines that even the wealthy cannot cross in public without consequence, and Diane had crossed one. Asterisk at the edge of the room. Thomas the MacD stepped forward. His voice was low but carried with the resonance of loyalty and truth. "She does have the power," he said, bowing slightly toward Lily. "She is William Morgan's heir. The diamond crown is hers." Gasps erupted like a chorus. Some covered their mouths, others whispered fiercely into champagne flutes. Staff members straightened their posture, nodding subtly as if confirming a truth they had all held quietly, waiting for this moment. Lily lifted her chin. She didn't need to raise her voice. The room bent toward her naturally now. "You see, Mrs. Richardson, when my parents died, their businesses didn't die with them. They came to me. Every contract, every signature, every decision has to pass through my hands. You thought I was invisible, but I was always the one who mattered most." The words carved through Diane's composure like fire through ice. Asterisk Maxwell's fury flared, his fist slamming the table hard enough to topple a glass of wine, crimson liquid bleeding across the white tablecloth. "Do you really think anyone here will side with you?" he roared. "You're a child with nothing but a name. Money respects power, and power belongs to people like me." But when he turned to the crowd for support, he found not nods, not smirks, but silence. His entourage shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their loyalty crumbling beneath the weight of public shame. One man cleared his throat, muttering something about needing air, and slipped away toward the exit. Another avoided Maxwell's eyes entirely, staring fixedly into his drink, asterisk for the first time in his life. Maxwell Richardson was realizing what true weakness looked like. Not poverty, not failure, but isolation. Lily leaned forward slightly in her chair, her curls catching the candlelight, her voice soft but lethal. "Money doesn't respect power. People do. And right now, they don't respect you." The room buzzed with energy, alive with the spectacle of an empire unraveling. Guests whispered her words to each other, as though memorizing them, passing them like gospel. Asterisk Diane's hand trembled as she reached for Maxwell's arm. "Max, sit down," she whispered sharply, though her voice cracked under the pressure. "You're making this worse." But Maxwell couldn't stop. He lunged forward, his face inches from Lily's, his breath hot and heavy with fury. "You don't scare me, girl. You're nothing. When the board sees what you've done, when your godmother realizes how badly you've ruined her plans, you'll wish you had never opened your mouth." Lily didn't blink. Instead, she slid her phone across the table toward him. The screen was still glowing, and one line of text sat open for all to see. Authorization confirmed. Richardson acquisition canceled. Effective immediately. The words were not a bluff. They were a sentence, Maxwell froze. His breath hitched. He snatched the phone, scanned the screen, and his face drained to a sickly shade of pale. It was real. The board had already received the notice. His empire had been cut out from under him by a girl half his size. Diane's knees buckled slightly as she gripped the edge of the table for balance. Around them, their entourage dissolved further, some standing quietly to excuse themselves, others exchanging glances that spoke of sudden distance. No one wanted to be tied to a sinking ship. Lily sat back in her chair, her small hands folding once more in her lap. "Daddy used to tell me something," she said softly, but the words carried across every corner of the restaurant. "That bullies always laugh the loudest, right before they lose." It was too much. Maxwell staggered back, his breath ragged, his control shattered. The diamond crown, once his prize, once his jewel, was gone, and it had been taken from him not by a rival billionaire, not by a powerful boardroom, but by a child who had decided she would no longer be silent. The room erupted in applause. Not polite claps, but thunderous, cathartic applause that broke against the walls and washed over Lily like a tide. Guests rose to their feet, staff joined in, and Thomas bowed deeply, pride shining in his eyes. Maxwell and Diane stood amidst the storm of it, stripped of their arrogance, pale and furious and small, and Lily Morgan, 7 years old, paralyzed but unbroken, sat in the center of the room like a queen reclaiming her throne. Asterisk, the diamond crown thundered with applause, the sound swelling like a wave crashing against marble cliffs. Waiters clapped with tears shimmering in their eyes. Guests rose from their seats in awe. And Thomas the MacD bent low in a bow that was less about duty and more about reverence. It was not the applause of politeness, it was the roar of justice, the sound of a room choosing its queen. But at the center of the storm, Lily Morgan sat very still. Her small hands rested in her lap, her gaze fixed on Maxwell Richardson, who stood paralyzed, his empire collapsing around him. For the first time in his life, he was no longer the hunter in the room. He was the hunted. Enough. Maxwell bellowed, his voice breaking under the weight of panic. The applause slowed, hushed, as he tried to claw back control. "This is a farce, a trick. She's a child. She can't possibly be the owner of this place. She doesn't have the legal." But his words choked to a halt from the back of the room. A tall woman stepped forward. Her heels struck the marble like a gavel. Her navy suit was crisp, her eyes sharp as cut steel, and in her hand she carried a sleek leather briefcase. Guests parted like water, whispering her name, Margaret Langston, the Morgan family's longtime attorney, a woman known in Boston's legal world as unyielding as granite. "Actually, Mr. Richardson," she said coolly, "she can, and she does." The room shivered with tension as Margaret set her briefcase on an empty table and clicked it open. From within, she withdrew a stack of documents, sealed with ribbons and embossed with signatures. She held them aloft like scripture. "William Morgan's will," she declared, her voice carrying with the authority of law itself, "reviewed and executed in court. All of his businesses, including the Diamond Crown, passed directly to his daughter, Lillian Morgan, to be managed under guardianship until she comes of age. Every board member has already acknowledged it. Every trustee has signed it. This is not rumor. This is fact." She let the words hang in the air, heavy as stone. "Any deal, including the one you attempted to force through, requires Lily's authorization." And as of tonight, she glanced toward the girl in the wheelchair, her expression softening into something almost proud. "It has been revoked." The silence that followed was deafening. Diane sank back into her chair, her perfectly painted face drained of all color. Maxwell's jaw worked soundlessly, his fury strangling him from the inside out. Around them, guests murmured like a chorus, their words blending into a single truth. The girl is the heir. The girl is the power. Lily's eyes swept the room, calm but blazing. "You thought I was invisible," she said softly, yet her words carried like thunder. "You laughed at me because I'm small, because I'm different, because you thought I couldn't fight back. But you were wrong. My father built this place on respect, and I will protect it with everything I have." She paused, her curls glowing in the candlelight, her face alight with something larger than defiance, destiny. "You wanted a crown, Mr. Richardson, here it is. But it will never be yours." A murmur of "oh" rippled through the crowd. Even the champagne fountain seemed to sparkle brighter, as if the diamond crown itself recognized its rightful ruler. Maxwell staggered forward, his hand trembling as he jabbed a finger at her. "This isn't over," he spat, his voice raw. "You think you've won tonight, but you've just made enemies you cannot imagine. We will destroy you, girl. Do you hear me? We will bury you." Martha's breath caught, her hands tightening on the wheelchair handles. But Lily didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing at her lips. "That's the difference between you and me, Mr. Richardson," she said, her voice calm, clear. "I don't need to destroy people to win. I just need to remind them who they really are." The applause swelled again, louder, sharper, unstoppable. Maxwell's face twisted, but Diane grabbed his arm, dragging him back. Their entourage scattered like leaves in a storm, eager to distance themselves from the stench of defeat. The Richardsons, once so untouchable, slinked toward the exit pale and trembling. Their empire fractured in front of Boston's elite when the doors closed behind them. The restaurant erupted. Cheers, laughter, tears, an outpouring of triumph that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with justice. Guests raised their glasses, staff embraced one another, and Thomas stepped forward, bowing low before Lily's chair. "Miss Morgan," he said formally, his voice thick with emotion, "the diamond crown is yours." Lily smiled then, a small but radiant smile, her eyes shining with both pride and grief. "No," she said softly, shaking her head. "It's Daddy's. I'm just keeping it safe for him." The room stilled once more, but this time the silence was reverent, tender. Guests lowered their heads, some wiping at their eyes. It wasn't the power of money they witnessed that night, but the power of legacy, of a little girl who had lost everything yet still found the strength to protect what mattered most. And as Lily sat there, the weight of her father's empire resting on her small shoulders, she knew this was only the beginning. The Richardsons would be back. Others would come. Battles awaited her beyond these walls. But tonight, in the Diamond Crown, she had won. And Boston would never forget the night a 7-year-old girl in a wheelchair silenced a billionaire family and canceled a $1 billion deal with nothing more than her voice.